Hi everyone, my name is Anna Maggio and I decided to do Palau Marine Sanctuary as my protected area. So Palau is a Pacific island nation with a history of a strong focus on conservation of species and the preservation of their beautiful surrounding ocean. It's made up of 6 different islands laying within an expansive lagoon that's enclosed by one of the largest barrier reefs in the world. It initially became an independent nation in 1994, and in the following years, it's passed multiple laws protecting parrotfish, sea turtles, and creating the world's first shark sanctuary. So, prior to Palau being officially established as a protected area, the nation was a member of the UN Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, which was established in 1947. The islands are made up of mainly native Palauans, a combination of inhabitants from Indonesia, the Melanese, New Guinea, and the Philippines nearly 3,000 years ago. And thankfully, because it's a marine protected area, no one had to be relocated or displaced from their homes. So after a long-standing practice of creating these bowls, which were essentially local laws and regulations put in place to protect specific areas of fishing zones in order to protect the habitats or the plants and animals, the President Tommy Remigijus Jr. announced to the nations their commitment to the Palau National Marine Sanctuary at a United Nations conference, and within a year it was officially declared a protected area on October 28, 2015, when Palau's Congress unanimously decided to create the Palau Marine Sanctuary. And this made it the largest area of protected ocean in the world. It takes up over 80% of their national maritime, so it's pretty big, bigger than the state of California. Palau is so special because it inhabits more than 1,300 species of fish, over 700 species of both soft and hard coral. It expands across 193,000 miles, which again is larger than the state of California, which is pretty crazy for such a small nation. It protects 80% of the nation's maritime territory, and it contains the most plant and animal species in all of Micronesia. The IUCN, it's Category 5. Category 5 means it's a protected landscape or seascape. This category focuses a lot on the protected area where the interaction between people and nature over time has produced distinct characteristics with a significant ecological, biological, cultural, and scenic value, and safeguarding this interaction is vital to protecting the area. The primary purpose of this category is to protect and sustain important landscapes, as well as seascapes in this case, and all associated nature conservations through traditional management practices. So there are obviously a lot of threats that happen, especially in these large coastal areas, and a lot of the previous and continuing threats of this protected marine landscape include overfishing, mining, fears of polluting the marine environment, and there are also a variety of underlying threats, including tourism, causing over-trafficking, and the economy suffering due to the loss of biodiversity that comes from this over-trafficking of the area. So overfishing was the major threat to the area. It began as a serious threat not only to the ecosystem but also to the economy of Palau, considering most of their economy is centered around their fishing industry. The illegal poaching and fishing was seriously damaging to the biodiversity of the ocean, as well as damaging to the tourism because not as many people would come to snorkel and dive and kind of serve those tourist industries, and therefore it affected the economy of the community greatly. And the bowls alone, which were kind of informal laws in place, were eventually not enough to deter a lot of illegal activity, and as a result, it wasn't limited until the official order was signed. So as for management of this threat, the bowls that I've mentioned before were traditionally put in place to declare certain reefs as off-limits, but now as a protected area, threats are managed using monitoring and evaluation approaches to enhance the positive benefits being seen through regulations to minimize the negative ones more each year. When it was signed as an official protected area, they decided to set in action this 5-year plan, that would just span a larger area of improvement. And a separate zone has been set aside for commercial fishing so that they're still able to gather the fish that they need for the economy to still thrive. And this, what they're calling the M&E plan, was co-designed by local stakeholders as well as the indigenous knowledge as an instrumental use of selecting cultural and institutionally appropriate processes. And what they're doing is they're kind of incorporating it and seeing how the community reacts and how the economy reacts and how the natural factors react, and then making different changes to how they manage those threats, which they've seen has been very effective. And going back to these management tools, at least 3 of the key principles Palau holds at the center for success. The first one being the impact on the community. They really take into account the economic and morale aspects of how their changes are affecting the community, because without community support, they realize that they really have no chance of being successful. The second would be ensuring the positive impacts outweigh the negative by closely monitoring and consistently reevaluating. And this is kind of what I had talked about with the M&E approach, where they implement a certain reaction to a threat and then very closely monitor how it impacts the surrounding area and then kind of go from there. So like I said, it's a 5-year plan, and they're consistently reevaluating the best way that they can manage the threats as they kind of continue to evolve. And the third is basing decisions off of science and observation and responding after the information has been collected. And what they've actually done is they've brought in a lot of scientists, and what they do is they go down and they'll dive and snorkel, and they'll take extensive pictures and do extensive research without taking any actual samples. So therefore, without taking any samples, they're not damaging the ecosystem at all, but instead they're just kind of observing it. And they have decided to not make any direct decisions without doing this collecting of the information first. And by approaching old and new threats with this in mind, Palau has been able to maintain a successful economy, tourism industry, and environmental change within several years, which is unlike any other country we've seen. So overall, the positive outcomes have been very strong. Palau has successfully been able to create and maintain the largest marine sanctuary known to date. They're also working on banning harmful sunscreens and plastics to prevent even further toxins from entering the crystal clear oceans. And they've really shown that as a community comes together, they're able to enact change that we may not have seen as feasible, but by taking their community and the ecosystem, their surrounding biodiversity into consideration, they've really been able to make a very impactful change, which is really incredible to see. And that is all about Palau Marine Sanctuary. I hope you learned a lot, and I don't know, be careful what you put into the ocean, because it really is important, and we can all have an effect on how our future goes.